Today was a really bad day. I had to write a script for this week's video, but had no motivation to work on any idea on my list. Then in the evening, thinking I would have to stray from my upload schedule, I opened twitter.com and was met with a post about necrophilia. My apathy and sadness completely disappeared. I instead became very driven and excited about this topic. And in the last minute, I came through. I have a video for you guys. And it's on the moral arguments against necrophilia and why they fail. Necrophilia is disgusting. Who in their right mind would want to discuss something so abhorrent? If you like to fuck corpses, there must be something wrong with you. How could you have that disgusting fetish? It's just gross and sick and twisted.
Not an argument!
1. No consent. Sure, the dead cannot give consent to sex, just like dildos, fleshlights, and blow-up dolls. That's not a problem though, because we don't need the consent of inanimate objects to do whatever we please to them. Once consciousness is over, that's all a cadaver is, an inanimate object with no volition and incapable of experiencing any sort of trauma from non-consensual activities. 2. The family of the deceased. The shock or distress that might be experienced by the family of the deceased is an argument often made, but easily dismissed. We do not typically consider the reaction of other people when deciding on the morality of an action. We only consider the harm inflicted on those involved in the action. It doesn't matter that homophobes or racists get upset by homosexual or interracial relationships. As long as all the parties involved in those relationships consent to them, in this case the only party being the necrophiliac, they will be considered morally acceptable. 3. Health risks. Corpses do not intrinsically pose a health risk. The health risks that corpses might pose are those arising from improper disposal or highly infectious diseases contracted by the deceased. That means that if the body of a healthy person is adequately handled by a mortician, it is no more dangerous than a living partner who might have an STD. And we don't even consider exposing yourself to STDs immoral, even if it is unwise. The only potential issue present in all corpses is the production of cadaverine and putrescine, substances that are toxic if ingested in large doses. However, they are much less toxic than spermine, a substance found in semen. So it seems that swallowing semen after a blowjob is much more of a health risk than having sex with a corpse. 4. Property rights. I couldn't find very clear information on who owns dead bodies. Either way, it would be reasonable to argue that the body should belong to the family, like the rest of the deceased estate. And only in cases where there is no next of kin should the state be given those property rights. Whether or not that actually is what happens doesn't really matter, because I'm examining the moral debate, not the legal one. Thus, if the family of the deceased does not allow necrophilia, which I would think silly, that's their prerogative. But then the moral problem becomes one of property rights, as opposed to one of necrophilia per se. Having sex with a dead body whose family does not consent would be as immoral as stealing someone else's sex toy, but it would also be only as immoral as stealing someone else's sex toy. 5. Psychology of the necrophiliac. Even though necrophilia has not been very much studied due to its rarity and the taboo that prevents necrophiliacs from coming forward, it is currently featured in the DSM-5 as a paraphilia, a condition characterized by abnormal sexual desires, typically involving extreme or dangerous activities. This article calls attention to that lack of data, but cites a 1989 study to support that necrophilia is clearly dangerous, since unlike other non-paraphilic fetishes, it has led to murders. Further academic investigation is indeed required, but out of the 87 necrophiliacs categorized by the study, only 14 were in the homicidal category, which indicates the danger is not inherent to necrophilia, so these murders can be condemned separately from the sexual practices themselves. Conclusion. And so, all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Don't kink shame.